You have a memory of your 5th birthday. Maybe the cake, maybe the candles, maybe a specific gift you unwrapped with shaking hands. But go back further. Try to find your 1st birthday. Try to find the first time you tasted food, or heard your own name, or saw your mother's face up close. It isn't there. Not blurry, not faded, gone. And here's the strange part. You were awake. You were learning. Your brain was working harder in those first 2 years than it will ever work again. So where did all of it go? Scientists have a name for this gap. They call it infantile amnesia. And for over a century, it has been one of the strangest unsolved puzzles in the study of the human mind. Sigmund Freud was the first to name it, back in the early 1900s. He believed the missing years were hidden on purpose, buried by the mind because they were too emotionally loaded to keep in view. For decades, that idea stuck. It felt right. It felt like the kind of secret a mind would keep from itself. But it was wrong. Or at least, it was only touching the edge of something much bigger. Because here is what should confuse you. Babies remember things. Not for years, but they remember. A baby can recognize its mother's voice within days of being born. A baby can learn that kicking a certain way makes a mobile spin and remember that action weeks later. Researcher Carolyn Rovee-Collier proved this with a now famous experiment. She tied a ribbon from an infant's ankle to a mobile hanging above the crib. The babies learned fast. Kick, and the mobile moves. Within minutes, they were kicking with purpose, delighted by the motion they now controlled, and when she brought those same babies back weeks later, without reattaching the ribbon, they kicked immediately. Their legs remembered before their crib even changed, so the memory was there. It was real. It was stored, which means the problem was never that infants can't remember. The problem is that adults can't remember being infants. Those are two very different claims. And the difference between them is where this story gets strange. Think about what memory actually requires. Not just storing an experience, but later being able to pull it back out, wrap language around it, place it on a timeline, and say, that happened to me, on that day, in that place. Psychologists call this autobiographical memory. It isn't one skill. It's several skills, stacked. A sense of self that persists through time. A working vocabulary to label what happened. A mental timeline to slot the memory into. And a hippocampus, the brain's memory filing structure, mature enough to bind all those pieces into a single retrievable file. Here's the twist almost nobody expects. That filing structure is still under construction in early childhood. Not broken, under construction. Researcher Patricia Bauer, who has spent decades studying how memory develops in young children, found that the systems responsible for long-term autobiographical memory don't fully wire together until somewhere around ages 3 to 7, and even then, the process continues gradually for years. Which means your 2-year-old brain wasn't failing to record your life. It was recording it in a format your 7-year-old brain, and certainly your adult brain, would never be able to open. Imagine writing an entire journal in a language you haven't invented yet. That's closer to what infancy is. The experiences happened. The brain reacted to them, learned from them, was shaped by them. But the retrieval system, the part of you that can later say, I remember this, simply hadn't finished building its shelves. And there's an even deeper piece to this puzzle, one that only came to light through neuroscience research in the last 15 years. Neuroscientist Paul Frankland, working out of the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto, studied something called Neurogenesis, the birth of brand new neurons, inside the hippocampus. In early childhood, this process is happening at an explosive rate. New neurons are being born and wired in constantly. And Frankland's research suggested something almost poetic. That flood of new neurons may actually be overwriting old memory circuits as fast as they form, a bit like a construction crew tearing down scaffolding to build permanent walls, except the scaffolding was holding your earliest memories. The very growth that builds your mind may be part of what erases your earliest experience of having one. Does that mean the memories are destroyed completely? Not necessarily. Some researchers believe traces remain, just inaccessible, like a hard drive with the file names deleted, but the data still technically there. Others believe the memories are simply gone, replaced entirely. dissolved into the general architecture of who you became rather than surviving as retrievable moments. Either way, the effect is the same for you today. The years that shaped your fears, your comfort foods, your instinctive reactions to certain tones of voice, all of it was built during a window you will never consciously revisit. This is worth sitting with for a moment. The version of you that existed before language, before a stable sense of self, before a working timeline, was not a blank slate quietly waiting for consciousness to switch on. That version of you was already forming attachments, already learning which sounds meant safety and which meant danger, already building the emotional wiring you carry into every relationship you have as an adult. You are, in a very real sense, still being run by a program written by someone you can no longer remember being. And this is where the story stops being about babies and starts being about you, right now. Ever felt an inexplicable wave of comfort from a smell you can't place? Ever flinched at a tone of voice for reasons that make no logical sense? Ever felt instantly safe or instantly on edge around a stranger who reminds you of someone, except you can't say who? Psychologists suggest these reactions may be echoes of that pre-verbal period. Not memories in the traditional sense, more like grooves worn into the emotional terrain of your brain before you had any words to describe what was carving them. Even the age at which the earliest memories tend to survive tells its own story. Most adults, when asked for their very first memory, land somewhere between 3 and 4 years old. Not 2, not 1. Right around the same age, Bauer's research shows the autobiographical memory system finally starts holding steady. It isn't a coincidence. It's the exact moment the shelves became sturdy enough to hold something for the long haul. So the next time you look at an old photograph of yourself as an infant, someone you have absolutely no memory of being, consider what's actually happening in that picture. That small, unremembered version of you was not waiting to become a person. It already was one. Learning your family's voices, learning what love sounded like, learning, one small unconscious lesson at a time, how to be you. You have a memory of your 5th birthday, but the real memory, the one that actually shaped you, is the one you'll never get back. It isn't lost because it wasn't real. It's lost because it was so real, so foundational, that your mind built everything else on top of it, and then, quietly, sealed the room where it happened.